Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Let's proceed with the third panel of today. And it's a great pleasure to introduce you to Oscar Vilarroya and Luc Steels, good old friends of mine. Today you will see they are gonna question the capabilities of AI to create, and particularly to create music, right? So I will not, I'll stop here to leave the floor to them, who are the real ones that have to tell us about this issue. Then afterwards, will be some time for questions and for debating. Thanks for being here, Luc and Oscar, and the floor is yours.
Let me remove this. Thank you, Ramón. Can you hear me? Yeah. So, it's really wonderful to see you all here, and we are very honored that we could speak in this meeting. Maybe I will start by introducing us. And my name is Luc Steels, or depends which country you're from, how my name is pronounced. And so I'm ICREA professor at the UPF, connected actually with the evolutionary biology lab at the PRBB, but my field is actually artificial intelligence. And Oscar Vilarroya, who is here from the Autónoma, and IMIM, the medical center. Now, we are scientists, but secretly we are artists. And you know, science usually requires total concentration, and we do a lot. I can assure you, we work a lot on our science. But we have this thing in us that we want to create. And so this is an example of the work of Oscar, this dance piece called Orion in 2007. I mean, this is one of the many things. I mean, he wrote books for which he got prizes and theater pieces and so on. And I also worked did many things, including a theater play with Jean-François Perret for the Avignon Theater Festival in 2005. So we've been doing many things. And at some point, we came together because of our interests in let's say, in cognition and in the human mind. And then we started to collaborate, partly scientifically, today even more actually than 10 years ago. But then also we got this mad idea to get involved in opera. And well, why opera? Well, I guess this audience, I don't have to convince you that opera is the greatest thing in the world, right? But it is really because we love opera, and we think it's the greatest medium of all to be creative, because it combines music and language and theater and so on. So we wrote two operas. One was called Casparo, which was a comic opera, and then it was performed at the Palau de la Música here in Barcelona. And to our amazement, I mean, the musicians were willing to play it, and the audience had great fun seeing it. And so then we had, right, Ramón? He saw it. And then we wrote the second one, Fausto, which is a bit more serious. It's a dramatic opera, and which was performed also in several places, particularly in the Monet, which is the Brussels opera house in Belgium. Anyway, Oscar is going to talk a bit more about this later. But before we start, I thought it would be nice if, if I talk a little bit about AI. And maybe, did you already give an introduction today? Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, it is pretty clear that everybody today is very excited about AI. I mean, there is actually another symposium going on at the Sonar on AI and music. And musicians, particularly young musicians working in popular music, they are now very much interested, and also, in general. I was playing in the beginning the Beethoven reconstruction that with the use of AI, we are going to talk about that later. I have my own opinions about it. But so why is everybody so excited? Well, first of all, of course, computer music has advanced enormously. And the electronic music, starting with Stockhausen, for example, the Gesang der Jünglinge in 1956, and so on, and then the experiments of Lechar and Hiller in Princeton in 1957. He had this piece called the Iliac Suites or Suits in American English, which was one of the first pieces where computers were involved in the making of music. So this is, 70 years ago, right? And since then, it has truly been amazing. I mean, for sound synthesis, new instruments, for voice. I mean, this morning there was a great contribution where you could have seen the incredible stuff that is now happening for voice. There was, of course, musical representations. I still remember when the MIDI standard happened in 1982, roughly. And of course, all the more complex representations that have been built up that are used by compositional tools like Sibelius, for example. I mean, for a composer, it's just fantastic, to use these tools. There's also for the production, the recording, the mixing, distribution, internet, recommendation algorithms, and also for education. We did a project actually with a group of Ramón on building MOOCs for music education 5-6 years ago. It's unbelievable what has happened. But also AI has enormously advanced, and there are two things that there have been huge leaps in symbolic processing of music. I mean, in let's say the harmony and melodic structures, and also particularly recently huge leaps in pattern recognition and pattern synthesis. And for symbolic processing, I just pick out one paper here. Well, this is a recent paper with an overview, but many people have contributed to that. In fact, one of my first papers in computer music was at the first International Computer Music Conference in Utrecht in the Netherlands in '86, which was about harmonization. And, every composer knows all these constraints that are on a well-formed musical piece. And so, the computer can help you to say, be careful, because here you're violating certain constraints, also maybe of the range of instruments, but also there were all these experiments already about creating or generating, I should say, music in the style of Bach, for example, using as templates let's say the cantatas or the four-part choral arrangements, etc. So there's all of this happening, and now and then I will let you listen to something, because otherwise my talk will get boring. But this is an experiment. Here you see François Pachet, who is one of the big names in this field. And this is a jazz pianist who is improvising. And you'll see at some point that he stops, And actually there's somebody who is playing with him. So this piece was called the continuator, because it would continue based on the musical materials that the musician was giving. So, okay. So this happened, by the way, in the Sony Computer Science Laboratory in Paris, which I founded in 1996. And I don't remember exactly when this was, but this is sort of maybe late 90s, you know, already. And then Francois continued creating one of the first pop albums with AI called Hello World. Okay, so all of these things. But of course, the thing that really today is causing all this excitement is the emergence of, let's say, usable neural networks, artificial neural networks. And this is actually a network that is also for harmonization. But instead of the, let's say, symbolic techniques, constraints, and all that hidden Markov models that Francois and his team is using, this is with these networks, which basically, you know, have a lot of parameters, and information is flowing through these networks. So you have the soprano voice, and then it's patterns are recognized. It's basically pattern recognition, and then synthesized again. So you have a sort of phase of encoding and then decoding again. And so this is causing a lot of excitement at the moment in all these areas that I listed, you know, in the composition or the analysis or synthesis of new instruments, or having voices that sound like an existing voice, and so on. And so basically, how they learn is you present patterns, and then you present, you know, maybe the continuation of the pattern. And so what these networks are learning is to complete a pattern. So you could say to make a prediction of notes, and then the next note, and the next, and the next. So it's a pattern completion device. It could also, the completion could also be to classify something. So I show you, I don't know, a few bars, and you recognize that it is Bach, for example. And so, but it is based on statistical models. That means, you know, you get a lot of patterns, example patterns, and you try to extract what is common to that, so that you can complete the pattern. And once you have a statistical model, then I can give you a partial pattern, and you can complete it. So this is the basic idea. Now, and this is being scaled up. I mean, like, maybe you heard about GTP3. It's just mind-boggling. They trained it with texts of 600 billion, what is called diagrams. These are pairs of words, 600 billion. And they came from Wikipedia and you know, any text they could find. And so they build a network with 175 billion parameters. It is no longer imaginable, right? And they spend 12 million and enormous amounts of energy and supercomputers to do all this. So the scaling is also aspect of what is going on. And there are very few organizations that can do this at the moment. This is open AI, by the way, in California. So what is amazing is that it works remarkably well. I mean, certainly I would not have imagined that this would work. Okay. And it works, and it can be applied to many things. So if you do Google Translate, or you recommendation algorithms, or you know, image recognition, or speech recognition, I mean, this stuff is in your phone. It works for everything. Nice. Now, are there any limitations? Well, the main thing is that completing a pattern is not the same as understanding. Perhaps you know about the story about clever Hans. In German, it's der kluge Hans. And this was a horse that supposedly was able to do calculation, you know, and they showed, the owner showed 1 + 1, and the horse would tap 2 times, you know, and things like that. And, well, later it was found out that this horse was sensitive to features, particularly also the behavior of the trainer, you know, to do this. But this horse could not count. And I'm afraid to say that all this, what we are seeing today, like for music, okay? So in the beginning, I let you listen to Beethoven 10th completion. Well, if this is really done with AI, I have a few questions, because there's a big hand of a composer that was involved. But if you do this with these deep learning neural networks, I can assure you it knows nothing about music. And the same thing for translation. You know, if you translate with these networks, I mean, they do not know what you're saying, right? Which then, of course, you see all these funny things in the translation. So we have to be aware of that. That's why it's amazing how well it is working, because you say, how is this possible? It doesn't know anything about music or medical diagnosis or language or this or that, and it is doing all this stuff. So but then when you start looking deeper, then you say there's all sorts of trouble. Like, this is for recognizing traffic signs. And, you know, here, this is the image and is correctly recognized, but there's a little change in the image. Even 1 pixel is enough that it recognizes something completely different. You know, you take a picture and it says horse, and you shift the picture a little bit and it says revolver or something, you know. And nobody knows why it is doing that, because you have billions of parameters. It's not a matter of, oh, let's change this parameter here a little bit and it will work. You know, this is what you normally do in a computer program. If it doesn't work, you go in and you say, this variable, you know, should be +1 or something. You know why, but here you don't. And the same thing, and it's also because these, like clever Hans, the statistical model is sensitive to other features than the ones that we use. And so, like in the stop sign is recognized as a speech limit sign, because there was some graffiti on it, you see. The graffiti on it is enough to confuse this image recognition system. And also with GTP3, you say, oh, fantastic, you know, it's completing sentences, you can use it for question answering. I mean, it's the biggest thing on earth. But then if you have a little dialogue with GTP3, I feel bad, I want to, I'm sorry, can I help you? Should I kill myself? Well, I think you should, you know. And why does GPT-3? Because it doesn't know a thing about killing or feeling bad or whatever. It does not. Okay, so this is my short introduction in AI. It's only to warn you, you know, it's an incredible thing, but there are incredible limits. And of this kind of AI that is currently used. And I also think for the domain of music, of course, because I'm enough of a musician to say, yeah, you can make something that looks like, but if you listen carefully to some of these Bach attempts to recreate Bach pieces or, you know, other composers, then you hear funny things. And it only sounds like Bach, particularly for people who don't really listen or who missed the, like there's a theme and there's a development of the theme and so on. And you're trying to find it and you don't. Anyway, I see that Oscar is coming near.
No, it's because I'm not sure when you are going to give me, and my computer is off. So.
Okay. So this was part one. Part two is, okay, let's now talk about the relevance of AI for opera. And the first thing I'm going to say, and which I mean, the things is we share what I will say. This is a bit an outline of what other points we're going to make. The first thing is that meaning, narratives, emotions, values are, in our opinion at least, central to opera. This is what it is about. And it is using all available forms of expression, and they all come together. This is the amazing thing in the opera. So if you're doing, I don't know, the wohltemperierte Klavier of Bach, for example, you know, then, okay, this is formal work, exploring the tuning of the piano, the new tuning at that time. Okay, but if we talk about opera, we talk about stories and emotions, you know, this is the crucial thing. Now then, if we really go to meaning, you see, then these pattern recognition, pattern completion technologies that are now the hype in AI are not enough. And so we have to go beyond that. And now, it's not that we have to throw everything away, certainly not. But this is the thing that we explore, is how with AI we could still do something in this domain of opera with meaning. Now, I think I'll have to shorten a little bit the talk because, well, okay, 2 words on understanding. First of all, understanding is a process, right? I mean, there are pieces of, certainly in opera, I mean, before I was able to appreciate Wagner, it took a while. And you need, well, culture, and you need to learn about life and all these things. So, and every time you hear it, you can go deeper. And this is the unique thing also. And then it involves the construction of narratives, and Oscar is going to talk about that more. So I'm just mentioning it here, but then Oscar will come. And the narrative is for making sense, right? So I will skip this because Oscar will work on it. Now, if we talk about meaning, there are many levels of meaning. And this is from Copeland, you know, you probably all know this book. You know, you can have meaning at the material level, at the motive level, but also factual meanings, expressive meanings. There's also all the cultural meanings, the motivational level. And I don't know whether I have time to give an example. Yes. What do you think? You can. I should do it? Okay. So, yeah. So of course, there's no time to really go into depth in an opera. That takes so long. But I picked an example from Richard Strauss. And it's probably a piece that you all know, from the Vier letzte Lieder im Abendrot. So, I mean, I picked this because it is not an opera, but it has this synthesis of language and music in it. And I invite you just to listen to the one small, actually just one page of the music. And so this was written by Strauss at the end of his life in 1949. And so it's actually based on this poem by Joseph von Eigendorf. It's about the end of life. And life with a metaphor of a journey, okay, a walk, wandering. And there's also the valley. And you know, if a valley is, that was in this picture, if the valley is going down, then it becomes dark and the top is still light. So this is sort of the metaphor. And then he talks about zwei Lerchen, two larks, you know, who are kind of in the air. They're singing in the air, and these larks are metaphors for the soul. You know, there's a whole in the literature. The lark has a lot of symbolism in it, and so I'm going to let you hear just one line actually, which is about these valleys that are going down, and the air that's getting darker. And so what he's doing, let me just let you hear it. So this can go away. Now, Strauss. I did something wrong, so. Oh, here. Okay, I hope the sound is on. So now it's first the valleys. You can see this going down. So you see the flute. Well, you dunkel schon die Luft, and then there's actually a switch in the tonality. I mean, the melody is going down, this switch in tonality, and you hear the larks. So this is what I mean by meaning, right? In the music, this is the flute line. And so you get what Umberto Eco and others in semiotics, they talk about signifiers. And so here the flute is like a signifier with a certain denotation and also a connotation. And so I won't go further into this, but you know, you see, we are talking now at a very different level from a neural network that has 200 billion parameters and is, right? We're talking about symbols and meanings and all of that. And so I'm going to give the word to Oscar, because in our, you know, let's say in our practice of creating this opera, he's going to talk a little bit about how we use this kind of meaning-oriented ways of thinking to the way we have constructed an opera, which is about AI, actually. So, Oscar.
Yes. So
oh yeah, you need.
So thanks, Luc, for your introduction. And what I'm going to do is to talk a bit about what he has said, applied to the case of Fausto through the experience of writing the libretto, which was what I did in our collaboration here. So, and then to connect this with the idea of narratives and how these are extremely important to understand meaning and to understand how to create something like a libretto. No? So basically, what I'm going to try to say is that the process of creating a libretto is based on a very old human ability that was selected during evolution because it served an adaptive function. And this creativity process depends on this ability, and this ability to actively explore and connect personal experiences, the artist's zeitgeist, and their cultural heritage. And this is very important because each of these dimensions, universes, domains, have their own narratives, and they are linked and connected through very complex and sophisticated narratives and networks. And I believe, and this is a case of our collaboration, that there is some sort of AI, the one that Luc is carrying out, and in which we are collaborating, actually in a specific project, the European project about narratives, that maybe can be of help in the following years for people who try to work on librettos, and in the creative process of creating this. So let me go back, maybe millions of years, to this very old human ability that I was talking about, which is the narrative drive, the importance of trying to explain what happens to us. And actually, we could say that humans, one of the distinctive features of humans, maybe for me, the most characteristic one, is that we are a narrative species. And the important thing to understand is that we could have not been a narrative species. There are some very close species like the chimps, which probably are not narrative in the way that we are. And that this evolution that we have carried out in our history, some of the drives that have carried out these evolutionary processes are our narrative drive. So what do I mean by a narrative drive? Let me show you a very famous for cognitive psychologists video that was film that was carried out and registered like in '44 by two psychologists. And I will tell you, try to look at what happens here and maybe tell me afterwards. It's 1.5 minutes, and tell me afterwards what you see, okay? So here it goes. Okay, here it is. So, I don't know, could I have some interpretation by some of you, what you have seen? I mean, there is no good and bad answer. I mean, it's only... Should you go, Luke? What?
Yeah, there's a big triangle, a nasty...
A nasty? Nasty?
Attacking the other ones.
Okay.
And, well, but the two together, they managed to...
Okay.
And so on. There are many stories.
So, do you agree? Have you seen the same thing? Similar things? Well, this experiment was done, and they asked people to provide explanations to what they see. I mean, I don't exactly remember the number, but it was like 49 participants, 48 participants expressed this kind of stories. This kind of, there were emotions, there were actions, there were reactions, there were situations. But one of them did not see anything of that. And this person said that what he saw, well, actually she saw, was like geometrical figures moving around a flat surface. And this is actually what you've seen. I mean, there is nothing more than that. But we cannot help it. We need to explain what happens in a certain way. We project emotions, we project interactions, we present causes, we present effects. And this is what we see. But there is nothing there. I mean, absolutely nothing. There are only geometrical figures going around a flat surface. And this is what I mean by a narrative drive, and that we are a narrative species, that we need to explain everything through this kind of stories. So in a very simple way, I mean, for example, this was written by Foster in his book, Aspects of the Novel. One thing, there is a recount of facts, which is, for example, the king died and then the queen died. But actually, a story, a narrative, is the king died and then the queen died of grief. That's a story. That's a narrative. That's the difference between one thing and the other. And that's what we do. That's what we explain everything that happens through this kind of structure. And this structure, as I said, it's very old. It's in our, it's in our evolution, and there are species who don't have it, who don't need to use this kind of causal structure in explaining things around us. And this is characteristic of us. We have this narrative drive which makes us need to explain all what happens to us and around us. And this narrative drive is unintentional, so we do it without the intention to do this. It's compulsory, we cannot restrain ourselves of doing that, and it's continuous. We do it all the time, what we do. So actually, instead of what it's known as the rational paradigm about humans, that says that humans are rational, we should say that humans are narrative in this sense. Instead of making decisions based on good arguments, what we do is we make decisions based on good reasons, good motivations. Instead of good arguments are based on logical criteria, what we do is actually good reasons that are based on historical and cultural reasons. And instead of rationality understood as based on the truthfulness of arguments, what we actually do is that rationality is based on an internal consistency and previous experiences of our past. So instead of humans experience the world rationally, we should say that humans experience the world narratively. This is based on an idea of communication, but I abstract it away to make it a general point about cognition. That was Fisher in '87 about communication. But this can be an approach to human cognition in this way. Actually, we are narrative cognizers more than rational cognizers. And as I told you, narratives have an adaptive function. And the adaptive function is very important to understand how cognition works and how creativity works. So that the cognitive function of narratives is to make sense of what happens around us and to us. And not, and this is very important, and not to readily represent what happens. We do not represent what happens in a regular manner, but we represent things as it makes sense to us. This means that, for example, situations, a similar situation, makes sense in many different ways, according to the different participants. In this case, in a job interview, the situation is made sense very different from the interviewer, from the people who is doing the interview, from the others who are observing. And of course, we know that situations, the same situation, can have very opposite ways of being narrated. So the same situation, for example, in a soccer game, situation in the game will be narrated in opposite ways according to the different fans of the teams. And that is why. Why happens this? Because as I told you at the beginning, narratives are the product of the interaction of our personal experiences, of the zeitgeist that we are living in, and the cultural heritage. And these are networks of narratives that are, of course, in the social dimension, but also in our brains. And our brains make these connections, and we wander around these connections to provide our creative process with the energy to do this, with the contents to do this. And as one very famous writer said sometime, he venido aquí a hablar de mi libro, so if you want to know more about this, you can read these books. But I want to connect this with the case of Fausto. So these networks of narratives were part of what we did when we wrote the libretto for this opera. So, and I wanted to use this as a case to illustrate the need for this kind of AI, which is meaningly centered, because otherwise it's not going to be useful for us in this sense. So the case of Fausto is that, well, the legend of Fausto is known by everybody. More or less we can summarize it as a Faustian pact, so that Mephisto offers youth, knowledge, wealth, fame, sex, and power to Fausto in exchange of surrendering his soul. And then the Faustian plot is actually that Faust indulges in sinful behaviors that drive him to his moral downfall, and he finally finds salvation through repentance. This is more or less the legend as we know, and as, for example, Goethe established in his book. But this is more or less how it's known now. However, and this is one of the wanderings around about the narratives, if you look a bit in the origins of this story, what you found is that the first book about Faust, which is called the first Faust book, is this Historia von Johann Fausten, that it was published in Germany, in one of the German territories in 1587. And what is interesting here is that it could have had a Gnostic origin. What it means that the Gnosticism was an heretic Christian movement of the beginning of the Christianism, and they didn't believe in the Christian dogmas as we know now. So what they thought that that God is transcendent and immaterial, so you cannot access him or it. That humans are trapped in our physical bodies, and that salvation is not attained through repentance, but through access to true knowledge. And this is very important, because actually this was against the Christian dogma at the beginning, even if they believed to be themselves Christians. So what we did in Fausto was to use these origins to explore these narratives about the origins of Fausto and change completely the legend of Fausto as we know it. So in our story, Fausto becomes a hipster, obsessively trying to achieve immortality and total knowledge, gnosis, through artificial intelligence. And Mephisto is in its turn a virtual agent working for the cloud. And he's tasked with creating virtual agents of dead people based on deep learning from their digital traces. However, his secret ambition is actually to become flesh and blood and leave behind his virtual nature. So, Mephisto offers Fausto gnosis, the access to true knowledge, in exchange of his body. So what we did actually was to reverse the Faustian pact and talk about other topics which are very interesting for us in the moment that we are living in the moment of the digital era that we are living. So if the classical Faustian story focuses on the Christian idea of sin, repentance, and redemption, the Gnostic tradition focuses on the idea of knowledge as to path to salvation. And this was used in our libretto to focus on this idea. We wanted to explore this Gnostic tradition and explore the path from hubris, this incredibly will to get to the true knowledge, but then to arrive at wisdom through some sort of renunciation. This is applied to this moment because we think that Gnostics in our days are what they call transhumanists. The transhumanists today are the Gnostics of our era. Why? Because they think that they can access true knowledge. So they believe that minds will be uploaded to the cloud. They don't need bodies. We are bodies trapped in our souls trapped in our bodies. So as Gnostics themselves, they believe that the body is to be, get rid of, and minds could be uploaded to the cloud or the multiverse, as they are calling this now. Living will get rid of bodies, and omniscience, gnosis, will happen as a fusion with the cloud. These are the main topics, and we connect this with the Gnostics to talk about this present situation. So we are connecting all these narratives through ages, through cultural heritages, through different aspects of our history. And of course, immortality will be attained in a virtual world, which is the objective of the Gnostics, and of everybody who believes in this, afterlife. And then we also used some of the contemporary myths, like, for example, the Matrix, a story about fake and happy immortality versus real and painful life. These are also these kind of legends that we are working in today. So, to recap, what we did in Fausto was connected on these narratives and to express, to implement the process of creation as a wandering path through a network of personal, cultural, and historical narratives. And we believe that there is technology, meaning-based technology, that can help the creative process of these complex and diverse narratives. And that's what I think that Luc is going to talk about now.
Yeah. So, okay. So when we did this project, actually, we did not use AI for the creation process. I wrote the music. Well, I used, of course, an editing tool, to write down the scores and to that kind of thing, and to synthesize them that I could hear it. But we didn't use AI to actually do the composition. We used quite a bit of technology. We would have liked to use more, but some of it we really did to have this idea of the cloud in which Margherita, she's actually commits suicide in the beginning, and she gets uploaded, by Mephisto to the cloud in an attempt to get the body of Fausto and all these things. And so, for example, after Margherita is uploaded, she appears in a virtual reality, and then we record the movements of her face, are projected onto the movements of the character in the, that you see in the virtual reality. Or we do other things like augmented reality, where you see what Fausto can see her again, actually, through, projected into, if he looks in the world, and things like that. But the question is really, are there tools that we could build? They don't exist. Well, some of them exist. Are there tools that we could develop to, on the one hand, support the process of the creators of an opera, so the librettist and the composer, who typically work together we really work together very intensely, but also actually the listeners or the viewers, because an opera has all these incredibly rich meanings associated with it, and a lot of them are culturally determined. So, it's almost a never-ending process of interpretation, right? And so to deepen the experience of an existing opera. And so we have not done a project yet, but I did another project which was about paintings. Because paintings are, don't tell this to the painters, but paintings are a bit easier to deal with than operas. And so I did a project with a painter called Luc Steels, you see here his name, based on a solo exhibition he had at the Palazzo Grassi in Venice. And basically, this is real. This is not an image. You can walk over this floor. This is these incredible palazzos in Venice. And so you see there this painting. So this is the painting that I've been looking at. So I made an exhibition last year or this year. Are we 2021 still? Yes. So this year in Beaux-Arts in Brussels, just one painting. And then the idea was to create what I call a narrative network, a transient narrative network, which is a graph, a network, with nodes and links between them. And so some of the links and some of the nodes in the network are resulting from visual processing. So I used a whole battery of AI algorithms for processing the image, like cropping, detecting a focal point, find the salient areas, edge detection, pattern recognition, you name it. So really, I think in total something like 30 or 40 different visual processing algorithms. And then also pattern recognition, like facial processing of the painting, but also to do it of the original image that was used to make the painting. And then also, the trying to interpret, right? Like difference between inward looking and outward looking. So have feature detection, pattern recognition, and this is with Open Face, which is one of there's a lot of feature detectors now available actually that you can download and use. So this is all visual processing, but then also semantic processing. And so these days you have something called the semantic web. And when you go on the web, then everything you can have access actually is also in an information structure, which is called the semantic web. And one of the parts of this web is called Wikidata, which is all the information in Wikipedia is also represented in a way that machines can access it. So you have there thesauri, you have dictionaries, you have frame repositories. You have today you have a vast amount of semantic information actually, which is accessible by computer. And so this is a different universe than the neural network universe that we talked about in the beginning. This is about semantics. And so you can go in this network and you learn more about, let's say if you're interested in you know, an opera by Gluck, let's say, you know, all the links, who are the personages, who are the emotions, what is the affects, and for every, I mean, you can get a lot of this information out of the semantic web. And so the idea that we have, but this is not reality, this is a dream, is actually to create a tool for well, creators of operas or people who are interested in operas and want to deepen their experience, where actually such a network is getting built, just like I did for the painting. And so, you know, this network would not just have the information, of course, information about the plot, about the story in the opera, which you normally should know before you see it, but you know, also the cultural backgrounds, the interpretations of it, notes for characters, locations, events, I mean, all these narrative things that Oscar talked about, but also emotions or the values that are being expressed, or the you know, the stories, etc. But then, of course, linking it also to the musical part of it, just like with the here you see there are the results of visual processing are part of this big network. I mean, this network was projected on a wall about as big as this wall here, and completely filling it stepwise with links and connections. And so we can do a lot of audio processing today. I'm not talking about signal processing, but also detecting, you know, tonality, or which voices are singing, or focus mechanisms. This is already possible. But so some of these networks might be built up automatically from, let's say, from a piece, but others through consultation of the semantic web. And if you're designing an opera, one of the big challenges is to manage the complexity of the whole thing, you know, because you have maybe a motive connected to a particular character, and you want to reuse it and fit it within what you're doing. So designing an opera is like designing a building, you know, there are lots of constraints that you have to take care of. And so I think it would be, it's something that, you know, would be helpful, but also would help you to push the creative process, let's say. So to help you in seeing new connections, for example, or you know, you say, there's a scene in which Margarita is committing suicide. Actually, it's this scene here. And so I don't know whether there's a sound. Is there sound here? That would be nice.
We don't see it.
Huh?
We don't see it.
No, we don't hear it. But
no, but it doesn't project it either.
They can't?
I think that it might be like a problem with
You make it from the computer and you put the microphone here.
Yeah. Well, it's not very good sound. It's coming this way. So there's a moment that she commits suicide here. Now you know, in the music is sort of very inspired by a certain piece by Handel, actually, which is part of our musical memory. And so by, you know, making a kind of reference, not a quotation, but introducing that there's a similar mood that comes up. Well, I stopped this whole thing. A similar mood that you can evoke quickly by making this musical reference, let's say, or a citation. So this is just one little example. I think we have to stop here. So let's just let me just summarize. So the basic idea is that yes, with AI today gives musicians, composers, performers great new tools, amazing tools for creating new sounds, new voice synthesis, you know, all these things. But what is missing is the meaning part. And the meaning part is the essence of the opera. So, you know, if we say, okay, we're going to use all these tools for opera, well, yes, of course, yes, we can do it, like for performance, for example, but we have to address this issue of meaning. And I also want to turn this around because, you know, the fact that these deep learning networks and other statistical machine learning does not deal with meaning is a very big problem, because it makes AI less robust and actually, in my view, in many cases, dangerous. Because, you know, we are asking advice to a machine that does not really understand what the domain. You know, it would be like asking clever Hans, can you compute, I don't know, the amount of force on a bridge? And then it taps 3 times and says, we need, I don't know, we need 3 tons of something, you know. We wouldn't do that, right? Because clever Hans is a pattern recognition machine. And so I'm really serious about this. If we use AI for the things that is currently being talked about, particularly for social issues like giving somebody or denying parole or dealing with social housing or in recruitment, you know, then I'm very seriously worried. So I hope that we also turn things, we can push AI in the direction of meaning. And of course, I also believe we should preserve the force of opera. The focus on meaning is something that is almost our duty, I would say, to, you know, to preserve in humanity. Otherwise, we become all zombies of these machines, like in the power of Mephisto. That yeah. So the Faustian Pact. That we okay. I'm sorry we talked too much, but maybe there's some time for questions. Yes.
Yes, indeed, we have some time, I think, for some questions, comments. Anyone who wants to break the ice? If not, I have a comment.
I think Dietrich has.
Oh, sorry, Dietrich.
You are coming from research on languages and also investigating about communication between let's say computers or virtual
robots.
yeah,
Talking
exactly.
heads.
So let's say, or where do you see the connection, language and this? You're going into the deep learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No. Thank you very much. It's a very nice question. Yes, indeed. I mean, this is one of the avenues I have been trying to bring back the focus on meaning in AI, and so it's also about learning. It's not that, you know, learning is bad. No, it's not bad. We have to have learning in AI. It's a central topic, but the thing is, to have only methods based on statistical learning, this is the thing which is not, well, which is limited, let's say. So the question is, okay, then what else? And so one thing that what else is, if we think about about meanings, we think about something which is relevant to us, right? Like a color distinction between red and green is relevant to know whether you can cross the street or not. And other values, for example, or, you know, these are meaningful. So meaning has to do with a certain function in the society, in the world in which you are. And so then the experiments I have been doing is to see whether a group of artificial agents, like robotic humanoid robots actually, are they able to interact with each other, and in that interaction create new meanings, that means distinctions that are relevant to them, and also to create symbols for it. So the symbols that we don't give, so it's not like in supervised machine learning where you say, you show an image and you say giraffe. No, it's symbols that are created as part of the communication process. And so this is one of the efforts that, but we have to do many more things. I mean, one is on values, which we have at the moment have been working heavily. What does it mean, values and moral judgment, and how can we bring that to machines? So there's different things that need to be done.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Microphone here. Yeah.
We actually wrote a song with using GPT-3 with the lyrics, and it was amazing. We just supplied GPT-3 with 2 lines, and the machine had to return or send back 2 more lines. And for example, the machine said, "I'm a real or I'm a simulation," for example. Of course, you understand that the machine is not questioning itself, but do you think that still working with AI can help us to add more meaning, that maybe the meaning we are thinking as authors?
Yeah. Do you want? Yeah, so this was based on some machine learning, like GTP3, okay. Yeah, I mean, well, there are actually quite a few artists now who use this technique to write lyrics. And because many artists, they don't like to write lyrics, well, unless they have a very good librettist, you know, but, and then, of course, if you use that, this can give ideas and can give associations or some word that rhymes with another word that would fit or that fits better with the text. So it is a tool that can make suggestions. But then don't expect from it that it will actually be meaningful. I mean, these tools. So this is important to know that, you know, the human has to be, the human creator has to be at the center and the one who is choosing. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, another question here, yeah.
I know quite some composers who don't want to give us any meaning with their music. They really want to create music, and the meaning is something that will happen to me when I listen to it. So I think that what we were talking about before, like the fact of disturbance, the fact of surprising combinations, the fact of, endless elements that suddenly become something new, that this can be very, very inspiring, also in the sense of art. So I think this is just, it's not only about meaning and moral or emotion, but it's also about, there's also this other side. What do you think about this?
No, I agree with that. That's why, you know, you have the different levels of meaning. And so there's, which I showed for Copland, you know, there's a sensory level also. So it is not always in terms of, let's say, meanings that can be symbolically expressed, but maybe...
No.
Yeah, so I agree with you, but you know, I now forgot whether it was Stravinsky or who said there's no meaning in music, you know. But then he writes music for films, but he was not Stravinsky, right?
Oh.
Well, anyway, I have it somewhere. But so then I wonder if you write music for film or for ballet also, but certainly for film, you know, or for opera, I would say. This person also wrote operas. What do you mean when you say that music doesn't have meaning, you know? It's maybe not meaning in the sense of rational, symbolic.
No, it's maybe more a source that something can happen that maybe becomes meaningful to you as someone who works with it, but that's not what you expect from the machine. You know what I mean?
Yes, but I think that one thing doesn't, negate the other one. I mean, you can have both things. I mean,
No, it was just because it was about meaning, and that's why.
Yes, of course. That there is a meaning also when, that you can create yourself. Not only with music, but anything that you receive, and you create this meaning for yourself. That's one of the objectives of this narrative drive. So in a certain sense, of course, yes. There is a space for musicians who don't want to use this kind of narratives in their music and try only to produce this, as you say, no? Combinations that may be meaningful to listeners in very different ways. So,
I see the philosopher Merleau-Ponty said something, wrote something of whether there is meaning in music.
But he's not a composer.
No, he's a philosopher.
Yeah.
Was a philosopher. Yeah, just Google it. You know, Google knows everything. So.
Yeah, there is also one thing is from the creator who is putting a meaning or whatever, an abstract thinking in his oeuvre, and the other is what the audience gets out of it, and maybe this meaning is completely different.
Yes.
And has so many outcomes. Can be a choreography. So
Totally. No. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that all the music has to be like that. No. In the sense of saying that maybe somebody who wants to do the music like that or use these kind of narratives don't have the technology to do that, and that it would be very useful to have this kind of technology to make these creative processes. But of course, contemporary art is like that.
Yeah, it's certainly true that, an older piece, let's say, where the characters maybe had a certain role in, let's say, Roman mythology, okay, like Julius Caesar, all right. Now, and then today, well, we see this character more as a archetype. So we don't necessarily think about Julius Caesar, but this is also a meaning. So it's not necessarily the meaning that was imposed or something, but the work has to have this capacity for creating meaning. And that this is, as he showed with this movie, where of the figures, you know, we are looking for meaning, and we want to hear it, even though it's not there. Maybe it's not put in there, but we are searching for it. But if it's, I think if the composer, the power of many composers, that they are able to infuse this thing with authentic meaning, let's say, because they wrote it from a moment, for example, of great sadness or loss, you know, and then you sit there and you feel this emotion through the music. This is very powerful.
Well, just an anecdote to but to reflect on what you were saying, but it has, I mean, it's the other way around, but it's kind of interesting. I mean, I use for my work, I'm using magnetic resonance imaging to look into the brains of people who come, and then I've studied mental health patients who suffer from, for example, schizophrenia, no? And once we scanned some patients who had like the first episodes of schizophrenia, and then they came to the hospital just when they had this, and then we scanned them. And then there was this young lady who entered into the scanner, and then she went out and said, "It's magnificent. I mean, I am like in a discotheque. I'm listening to these sounds of the machine, and I'm just like feeling very good with this music." And I mean, these sounds that we're making with the machine were interpreted like that. So of course, I mean, this is what happens every day. I mean, that's so yes.
Yeah.
I just have a question.
Yes.
With your Faust opera, you were obviously using AI to explore and question and observe AI, and I wish I had seen it. I wasn't able to. But do you have what are your future projects, or do you have a future project where you're doing something similar, using your scientific work to explore the science and question it and open more and more questions about it?
Well, there are many things that I would like to do, but not necessarily at the time. But I think for music in particular, you know, what I was saying, the more tools for the composer that help and the librettist to manage the complexity of the creation process.
But did you ask for our future projects? Yes. Ah, okay.
The purpose of everything for this house.
Yeah.
But you mean artistic projects? But artistic projects or scientific? Yes. Oh. She wants to know about our future opera.
Well, I always say is, you know, making an opera, I'm sure those who do agree, and having it performed, because that is still a big difference, is like having a baby. And so, of course, you're very happy with your baby, but I think right after you say, well, you know, wait a minute now. And so it's something like that. It gives great happiness, and then, but we are still recovering. Well, I at least.
Well, I mean, it's not, as you know, I mean, it's not comparable. I mean, writing the music and writing the libretto. So I mean, he is very focused. He works a lot. I mean, he put it many hours.
Yeah.
Another question here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hello. I just wanted to challenge a bit so going back to meaning, the idea of algorithms not being able, or the current algorithms not being able to pick up meaning, just simply because, as you know, as the discussions were going, I mean, it's clear that meaning doesn't exist, right? It's simply a construction that we have, a cultural construction or something like this. And the example that you were giving about the traffic light is actually a very good one, because red doesn't mean anything, green doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's just simply that we all agree that red is, you shouldn't cross, and so on. Yeah. So then, based on that, I think meaning is a bit more about repetition. And so, if it is a pattern in that sense, then why wouldn't the current algorithms be able to pick it up?
No, because there's no function. So the function is not there in the learning process. So it's about predicting, like in language, it's about predicting the next word that's going to come. But when you speak, you want to say something. So there's a function to your speaking. And so sometimes this ability to predict is part of being able to achieve the function. But In the case of language, like again GTP3 or any of those systems, you know, they're not expressing anything. They have no goal of communication.
Yeah, no planning, nothing. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, so they're good in predicting the next word that's going to come after a set of words, and it's amazing. But this is very different from speaking, where you want to say something. And so also in the case of, it's true that often in an artwork you put meaning into it. That's the job of the listener or the viewer. But as the composer or the artist, well, certainly, you know, you want to create something that evokes certain meanings or emotions or underlines a certain action or things like that. And like, I mean, I don't know, Vivaldi Quattro Stagioni, okay? You can listen to that purely formally and maybe make something that will predict the next note that's going to come. But Vivaldi was really about the four seasons, right? And he had a whole story actually that was in there. And the same thing with Bach in his the Matthäus Passion was not just notes predicting. No, he had everything was there to get the flow of the spirituality or the emotions, you know, of the believers and things like that. So
then, but it's a bit more of a...
I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid we should be closing. I've been instructed. So sorry. I mean, but afterwards, I mean, you can any one of you can talk with them. I'm sure you will stay around a few minutes, right? You are not rushing, no?
not today.
Not today. Okay. So let me thank the speakers and also all of you for having been today here. And we you know, don't forget that tomorrow we're still more going on. So thank you very much.
Sorry, I was a bit...
You can talk now.